Ayisee Stock presents Creative Spotlight, a live talk with creators. In this episode, we'll talk to Kervin Brisseaux, a talented digital illustrator and Haitian-American creator. We'll talk about his creative process, his work with big companies like Adobe, PUMA, New Balance, and more. Join us this Friday, October 27th at 12 o'clock p.m. on Ayisee Stock YouTube channel. Subscribe now to be notified. Ayisee Stock presents Creative Spotlight, a live talk with creators. In this episode, we'll talk to Kervin Brisseaux, a talented digital illustrator and Haitian-American creator. We'll talk about his creative process, his work with big companies like Adobe, PUMA, New Balance, and more. Join us this Friday, October 27th at 12 o'clock p.m. on Ayisee Stock YouTube channel. Subscribe now to be notified.
Welcome to the brand new Ayisee Stock, a platform that celebrates the rich cultural heritage of the Caribbean, Africa, and people of color, promoting diversity and inclusivity through our visual content. Our platform offers royalty-free stock photos, vectors, and footage that's all high quality and expertly curated. If you're a designer, marketer, educator, or creative professional of any kind, you're gonna love what we've got in store for you. With our easy-to-use search function and filters for color, orientation, and more, finding the perfect image has never been easier. And get this, you can download your assets with just one click. How cool is that? And the best part, you can save your favorite assets to use in your projects later. That's right, we're all about making your life easier. And for all our global users out there, we're available in 4 different languages. We want to make sure everyone can benefit from the amazing content we have to offer. Now, I know you're probably wondering, how can I access all this awesome content? Well, we've got different plans that you can choose from to suit your creative needs. So whether you need just a few images or a whole bunch, we got you covered. So what are you waiting for? Come check us out and see what all the hype is about. At Ayisee Stock, our mission is to change the way people of color are perceived and represented in media. Let's make this happen together.
Hi. Is everybody everybody hear me? We're good. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Martina, and today I will be your host at Creative Spotlight for Ayisee Stock. Today we have the pleasure of speaking to Kervin Brisseaux. I'm hoping I didn't butcher his name. Kervin Brisseaux. He is a creator. He is a talented digital illustrator. And today we're really happy to have him here to talk about his work, the things that he does, and how, it integrates with Ayisee Stock. So welcome, everyone. And here's Kervin.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet you, Martina, as well.
Nice to meet you. I did a brief introduction, but I would like for you to go ahead and, hype yourself up. I kind of want to hear you from your point of view.
Cool. So my name is Kervin Brisseaux. Again, it's nice to meet you all. I've been in the creative industry for about, I would say, over 15 years now. I started in architecture specifically, studied architecture at Syracuse for grad school and then Catholic University for undergrad before transitioning full-time into illustration. I'm sure we'll get into that more specifically later. I worked at Vault 49 as an artist and eventually as a design director for about 10 years before finally moving out onto my own. This was around the time of the quarantine during COVID, where I decided to start my own company, a team of one, as I like to say. And I've been working as a freelance illustrator ever since. under the representation of BA reps here in New York and worldwide.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Those are really great, amazing things to hear. And you are a Haitian American, right?
That's
Oh,
right. First generation
oh,
Haitian
I'm not
American.
a sac passe, but
Of course, yeah.
welcome. So let's get right into it. Tell me could you just share a little brief anecdote about your collaboration with a prominent company within your portfolio? What do you in your line of work, what would you say has been the best so far in terms of the things that you've done?
Wow, yeah. I mean, it's a hard one to answer because there's been quite a bit that have influenced me as an artist over the years. But I would say one that struck me almost instantly when you asked is Adobe. I say that because this was a relationship that I've had as a designer, them being a client, almost as long as I've been an artist. I had my first sort of interaction with them directly as a designer at Vault 49, where I was able to establish a really close working relationship with the likes of Brian Yap. Who was a creative director at the time. I'm not sure if he's still there now. He might be. And ever since then, it's been like an ongoing relationship where I've got to do quite a few fun projects for them. Got to do a few Adobe Maxes as well as a sort of lecturer, as a teacher, as an educator, and also just working on a variety of different illustration projects for the likes of Photoshop, Illustrator. I guess my claim to fame in a way was being the Illustrator splash page for 2019. And ever since then, that was like sort of like a turning point, landing them as a client for freelance, where I just sort of was able to just establish more confidence within myself as an artist, as a freelance artist. And, in credit to my employer at the time, Vault 49, who were super supportive of me freelancing. It's not quite common for studios to allow their designers to freelance outside of work hours, but they were super supportive of that. And it basically allowed me to kind of grow a foundation, being able to do that part-time as a freelancer until finally jumping on to my own company years later. And to this day, Adobe is still very much a part of my working relationships. I tend to do quite a few. I actually just did one really cool this past summer for Juneteenth, kind of an ode to Haitian culture, if you will. Sort of representing and incorporating some anecdotal historical elements within the illustration that were really important to me, and I thought was really cool to kind of bring to life in illustration.
Okay. You talked about your Haitian heritage being an influence part of your art. So it's two-part question. The first question is, tell us a little bit more about your art. I got a chance to take a look at some of the amazing work you've done, and they're breathtaking, and I would love to know the story behind the art. And then the second part of the question is, how does your Haitian heritage influence the art, it's like directly? So just tell us a little bit more about that, and how it came to be, what got you into it.
Yeah, sure. I guess to answer the first part, if I'm being truly honest with myself, my work inherently is very nostalgic. I tend to draw a lot of my inspiration from my childhood. Just remember growing up watching a lot of cartoons, a lot of anime, reading some comic books, and just kind of looking on with awe and envy, not being able to do those things myself and wanting to learn how to do those things, how to draw, how to create characters, how to create cool imagery. And it really just stemmed from that. And then just trying to understand the mediums and the process that goes into making something like that. Eventually, that also curtails into some of my other side hobbies, playing video games, hanging out with friends, listening to music. All those things really feed into my creative process. And while my style over the years has evolved and the themes may slightly change, it always goes back to that era of nostalgia for me as a child, looking back into those things that inspired me at the time. I always am a sucker for really, really cool sort of Japanese animation. Anything that sort of is inspired by that aesthetic is really nice. Over the last few years, fairly recently, I would say typography has been a big part of it too. and just overall graphic design language has worked its way into my process to kind of create something that isn't just one note, if you will. If you look at my work over the years, I played quite a bit with different genres, starting mostly within like the sci-fi space, and then going into more graphic design, key visual, working with brands, thanks to the likes of Vault 49. Photo illustration was a big part where I really got into photography over the last few years, collaborating with photographers eventually to create some cool sort of mixed media stuff. And then now I'm in this headspace where I'm creating a lot of character work. And it's not even so far as to like necessarily land clients that specifically ask me to do that. It's more about I kind of see what I have my repertoire as a kit of parts and what makes up my arsenal always just feed into the end result. So all the stuff that I'm doing nowadays, I see it kind of going back to like a larger picture, like a tapestry of elements that kind of work into my next artwork. So it kind of flip-flops a lot in terms of what my interests are and what I like to do, but that's kind of the headspace I'm at right now creatively. And then when it comes to the actual Haitian culture component, that's actually a very recent development. I've always been proud to be Haitian, but struggled to understand how I can start to incorporate that more with my work. And then I realized that one of the very simple things to do is just to incorporate more people of color, especially within my character designs. Now, granted, a lot of my work is quite branded in the sense that I kind of stick to a very restrictive color palette. So then that makes me or forces me to put the extra work in order to focus on the details, the features, to overtly make it clear that these are in fact characters of color whenever I need to portray that, right? The other thing too, again, mentioning that Adobe project, for example, kind of being a bit more deliberate in my sort of narration of the piece, you know, outside of the composition. What are the stories I'm trying to tell? You know, these are the things now that I'm starting to like research and analyze and start to incorporate, starting off as Easter eggs, but over time it's going to become more and more deliberate in terms of that link between my Haitian heritage and the pieces that I'm doing in the future.
Okay. Do you speak Creole by any chance?
Un petit peu, yeah. Je parle créole, mais on peut parler trop fort.
On va parler trop
On peut
fort.
entendre
On
le bien.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because we have a few of our viewers, they're currently in Haiti, and I just wanted to sort of shed the light on the importance.
Oh yeah, please. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, whatever it takes. I would love for them to be included.
Okay, good. What would you say is an advice you would give to someone who currently wants to get in your field, and especially put yourself in a situation to where the person, imagine them living in Haiti, and they want to get involved in what you're doing. What would you recommend as a first step to get into a space like that?
It's a great question. And, you know, it's kind of hard to answer that question without acknowledging the fact that there is really like a lack of access for a lot of people of color to get into design, especially worldwide, depending on where you are. But I would say, you know, for myself, especially, and part of that is because, again, I had access to these things. Self-education was a big part of where I am today. Yes, I went to school. Yes, I had the educators that kind of steered me in a certain direction. But a lot of the sort of things that I do today, the artwork that I do today, comes from me just putting in my own time outside of school hours, outside of work hours, and just practicing things that I would not have had time to do during the day anyways. So I say the first thing is to honestly ask yourself if this is something that really interests you. And if it is, then the next step would be to kind of self-educate. Try to expose yourself to more forms of artwork if you have that capability. You know, it's as simple as just doing like a quick internet search on different types of art genres. You know, trying to have access to different mediums. You know, it starts with just a pencil and paper and just practicing. And that's not to say that, you know, just by drawing every day, you're going to get better. I think a part of that too is also being critical about what it is that you're doing and trying to have a plan of action in terms of what it is that you're trying to make. So for example, let's say you want to become a character designer or a typographer. Part of that is kind of exposing yourself to different forms of that genre of art that interests you, seeing what's been done before, understanding or trying to at least analyze and see what is it about those pieces, those artworks that you see make them good, at least to you, formulate an opinion, and then start to practice and formulate your own way of recreating those things for yourself. Because then you start to really create a tone of voice and have an opinion. And I think that's part of the struggle is, a lot of times we're um, sort of creating in a bubble without really sort of absorbing new information and kind of informing yourself to kind of feed into your process. And then I feel like a lot of it is not just, heads down, creating artwork for the sake of it, but also like understanding what's out there, what's been done before, and not being so caught up on being necessarily original, but rather having a clear interpretation, your own voice within that space. I think it's super important. Yeah.
So what? Okay. So in order for someone to even attempt, I would say, into a field like this, you would definitely need to sort of visualize yourself within those spaces to even see how that can even, become a thing for you. And
Hmm.
I want to say, it's sort of like figuring out your own creative process in a way.
Hmm.
So what would you say would be your creative process when it comes to, let's say, you get a project and you've already went through the basics of everything you've learned. So what
Hmm.
would you say when you get a project land and you're like, okay, well, it's time for me to do this. Like walk us through that process of what that looks like, when Kervin get a project and he's like, okay, I'm about to go ham. It's time.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great question. And it's evolved over the years, just as I matured as an artist. Because in the very beginning, I think one of the things that helped my process now is understanding the fact that that's exactly what it is. It's a process, and you're not going to nail it the moment the pencil hits the paper or the moment the mouse, you click the mouse in Photoshop. Like it takes time to get to your own quote unquote masterpiece, if you will, or at least to get to a point where it's something that you're proud of, right? So in the very beginning, I was very impatient as an artist where I wanted something to just look good right away. And
Mhm.
a lot of that was kind of just learning to take a step back and trying to psychoanalyze where that's coming from, that eagerness of getting to the final result. Um, and once I, tried to like sort of have that moment of self-reflection, I realized that a lot of what makes great work is that process, is the journey of messing up and failing and trying again and starting over and recontextualizing what it is that you're trying to achieve. So for me now, when it comes to artwork, it always starts with just researching like a mood board, trying to find references that kind of speak to what it is that I'm actually trying to achieve. It's a form of practice that I kind of dabbled at in architecture school, but I really put into practice at my tenure at Vault 49 as a design director. And then from there, once you have that tone of voice and you're able to sort of speak to what it is that you're trying to teach to the client, if that's what they're asking for, assuming that the client doesn't have a direction just yet, then the next step is to kind of stay in the schematic space and just like chicken scratch and just roughly sketch out and figure out ideas. And it doesn't have to look good. It's just about kind of putting things down on paper and kind of quickly design shredding, which is like an architecture thing, like just quickly creating results very crudely just to see how it looks visibly on the screen or on the paper. Nailing things like composition, rough poses, et cetera, et cetera. And then
Mhm.
once that's done, once we figure that out, then it's about sort of fine tuning and refining, figuring out the color, figuring out the line weight, figuring out whatever is needed to make sure that the key visual is something that the client is happy with.
Okay. You talk about figuring out getting to the key visuals. I want to say, how do you balance maintaining your unique artistic voice while also meeting the requirements and expectation of clients, from these various industry? Because like I said, I looked at your art and I'm like, okay, this is something that's very, in my opinion, it's new because that's not something in my field that I'm used to seeing. However, but they all have it's like your own personal branding. So I want to say, how do
Yeah.
you manage to keep your personal branding as an artist within the guidelines of these other companies of what they need you to do?
That's a good question, and it's a complicated one because it's kind of gray. There's no like sort of right or wrong way to approach this. I mean, I guess you could say there is maybe a wrong way, but I'll start from like a couple of different viewpoints. From the viewpoint of if you're like an artist working in an agency, like working in a design studio for a client, um, I would say, it's really less about the self and more about, what's better for the team to achieve that goal. So what I mean by that is, we all have ideas. We all want to, put our put our foot in the ring and just like kind of, come up with that great idea that everyone was going to be like passionate about, right? That's a point that I feel like all artists have, and it's a selfish one, but a right one to have, because why are you in here if you're not looking to share your own ideas? But at the end of the day, when it comes to your tone of voice, it's really about the collective as opposed to the person. And that's not to say that your tone of voice can't get in there as you're working through the project. It is a team effort. We'll all have our bits to play, and at the end of the day, the end result is like this orchestrated thing that's created by your band, right? So that's one reality that you have to face. The second reality is, as me as a freelancer, right? It's a bit of a tug of war, not in like a violent way where like it's antagonistic or whatever, but it
No, but
really comes down to the client, right? So
mhm.
I'll have some clients who already have a very clear direction. Like, this is exactly what the brand is. This is what we want. And can you achieve this? Now, this is like one reality where like, okay, yeah, I'm literally just here to be a hired gun. I'm not really here to like kind of inject necessarily a
Yeah,
whole
'cause
new
it's like I'm
approach.
here to just follow the rules and just whatever you
Exactly. These
it's
are the
gonna
brand
get done.
guidelines. I get
Mhm.
it. Here's where I am. Now, that's not to say that there are moments where you have to problem solve and design solve. And again,
Mhm.
as a freelancer, part of that is also understanding that, they're coming to you because you obviously have done something in your portfolio that they also want for their own brand.
Yeah,
So
so it's
in reality,
yourself within those work as well, you know?
yeah, it's inevitable. Like, they're coming to you as a sole freelancer to work on something in your style. So regardless of how much sort of red tape there might be, your voice, your DNA is still in there somehow because you're the one who made it. And then there's the other extreme where, they're literally coming to me, be like, we like what you did here. Can you make this for us? And it's like something that was like a personal piece
Mhm.
where it was just like this really cool, fun thing, like this photo illustration. And they like PUMA is a good example. I did a PUMA project a couple years ago where that came from just a couple of years of me putting in my own time, just, you know, finding photographs to work with, working with photographers, and just doing personal projects and putting it up on my Instagram or putting it up on my Behance. And eventually, clients may see that and be like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. We want this for a social media campaign. Can you do exactly that?" And I had complete and total creative freedom. Like, there was very little to no feedback on that. It was just, here's a little campaign. We're releasing a new shoe. Can you take care of everything? Can you source the models? Can you do the photo shoot? Can you do the illustrations? And it was like, yeah, sure. I learned a lot on that job. I figured a lot of things out on the fly, but it turned out to be very fun and very successful. Now, that's a very romantic story because it doesn't always work out that way. It doesn't always
Mhm.
turn out that well. But those are kind of like the three sort of realities, at least in my mind, that I faced where, it's really a balancing act. You have to really learn how to be selfless first, I think, before you can really successfully be selfish and like be like, no, this is exactly what works. This is my voice. This is exactly how it makes sense. And that's not to say that can't happen in the agency space where you're working for a studio, but you have to earn that, I think, too. That there's a climb that has to happen before you can get there, I think.
Okay. So we've talked about your creative process. We've talked about how someone can get, if they're thinking about getting into this industry,
Mm,
something that they can do to help themselves, get into those fields. We talk about different aspects of those. Now, with technology being the way where it's at right now,
mhm.
and of course, the use of AI for creative projects, first of all, where do you stand on the use of AI in terms of,
Yeah.
the digital space for work? And then how do you view the role of AI in the industry overall? So from your standpoint, how do you see it affecting your work and then the
Yeah.
industry itself?
Yeah. So my gut reaction when I first saw AI was that it was cool at first, and then taking a step back, I'm like, oh, actually, there could be some serious implications. Like we've seen artists
Yeah.
working ripped off,
Mhm.
stolen. Um, how are you sourcing this? How are you creating this? Who was the source artist for you to create this image? Like, why are they not being credited? Are clients paying for this? Like, whose money are you taking out of their pocket to make this? Like, there were a lot of those sort of existential, stressful questions that came into my head too.
Especially with those apps that comes and it's like, hey, you can create an illustration of yourself by just uploading a picture.
Yeah, but it's like, where did that style come from? Exactly. It's like that came from some other artist. They sourced that content to create that style. It's not being made out of scratch. You know what I mean? But on the flip side of that, I think as artists, there's definitely benefits to AI in terms of, I would say things like, research where, think about, for example, a very basic example. If you're looking for a stock photo of something or like a reference image of something that you're trying to create and you can't quite find exactly what it is you're looking for, I feel AI is quite useful for that. It's like, I need a girl wearing a frog jacket, walking a dog that's upside down, like something random like that. And like, sometimes it's hard for people, especially people who can't really think visually, but are artists. Like, it's helpful to have a tool that can visualize that for you just through prompts. Like, you're writing a prompt and it's like, okay, here it is. And you do a couple of iterations of that. Oh, it's like, oh, okay, this is exactly what I was thinking. Okay, I have this reference image. Now let me go into my canvas and do my artwork. I think there's something very beneficial to something like that as artists. Ultimately, I think AI is obviously here to stay. It's been made, cat's out the bag. It's not going to go anywhere. And I think it's the same thing as if you think back to the first invention of digital art in Photoshop first came out, or like digital artwork, or, the first digital cameras when they came out. Think about the stress that film photographers had about that. It's like, oh, this is not real photography. It's doing this, is that. So you're not developing. Like, this is like a conversation that happens in cycles, especially when it comes to technology and art. And I feel like as artists, we always hum and haw in the beginning, but we also have the skills as a collective to do a paradigm shift and be like, okay, this is the tech that we have. Let's make the most of it and see how we can actually have it work for us rather than against us. And I think it's going to be the same with AI. I think we're going to just figure it out. And I was mentioning this before to Jameson that, I think it's going to get to a point where I feel like when it comes to AI, that it's just going to be like this integral part of our process now, where it's just here to stay. But what could be interesting about it is this concept of the metadata, where now you can sort of validate exactly how a content is made. You know what I mean? Like, I think metadata is something that I myself personally took for granted, which has always existed, but now has evolved a bit more now. I think that's going to be very crucial in terms of validating the authenticity of the author that made said image. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's a part of that shift, that part of that paradigm shift, where we're just going to have to be a bit more agile and just have it, be just a part of our process. And for those who don't want anything to do with it, I don't think it's going to necessarily undo our careers per se. I think it's like most things. I think it'll just be like a part of the skill set of an artist's repertoire, and just like there's still film photographers that are hired for projects, I feel like there'll still be traditional artists that are hired for projects. Just like I'm a digital artist, I'm going to get hired for projects. I don't think AI is going to undo my career either. I just feel like, the initial nerves just came from the fact of how quickly and how rapidly it was creating content from sources that, were made by people that, need protection from something like that, especially for nefarious acts that, try to utilize it for their own gain.
So I asked a question about AI because when we're here on obviously because of Ayisee stock, and that's what brought us here today. And when I think about their mission statement, which is to promote diversity through vibrant photos to showcase the rich tapestry of people of color. And they aspire to create a world where everyone is honored, appreciated, and embraced in integral numbers for their diverse global community. So basically, Ayisee stock is, in my opinion, this space where you go and you find people who look like you and me that's out there living their lives. Honestly, that's the goal behind it, to have that form of representation that's out there for us, by us. And I think
Mhm.
that's something that we currently in a space where, AI is evolving. They can makeshift a person of color for you depending on your request. What are your thoughts on, being able to having a space that focuses on people like us, and highlighting what we're doing, and that, showing that we do exist in the regular world? Like, I feel like AI just got out in that point where it was like the moment where we started figuring out a solution for something, like,
Mm.
hey, I need to see a picture of, a black boy swimming, or not, or a black boy surfing. And now we're getting to that space where we're able to have access to technology that can help us put something like that out there. And then here comes AI, like, well, I can create that for you, like, I don't know if you ever watch shows. It's like, I can fix that. And
Mhm.
that's kind of like how I see it. So what are your thoughts on, just the shift that's currently happening in our world, of course, with AI coming in, and of course what Ayisee stocks truly believe in, and trying to make that change before, I guess you can say, AI takes over?
Yeah, I mean, I think a part of my thinking behind this is it goes back to the protection issue where, as artists, we do need to get protected for something like this. And I think it's something that's in the works. I have, to be honest, I'm not too versed in terms of like the ins and outs of the sort of legal and even the political implications of AI as it pertains to artists. But I do think that, one of the things that a lot of these big companies, that run stock programs, for example, and eventually, IC stock included. I think one of the things is, it would behoove you guys to also protect those same artists from, people or nefarious actors who are going to upload content that's AI generated for monetary gain, right? It
Mhm.
goes back to that metadata issue. So maybe there will be, eventually we can create systems in place where, through the upload process, for example, there could be a validation process of understanding exactly what image or where this image actually came from, how it was generated, how it was made, what's the editing that went into said image, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's one aspect of it. And on the other aspect of it too, I feel like a part of the beauty the of AI technology is it seemingly is quite democratized right now. So meaning that you can create your own sort of AI generative tool as well, that could maybe help aid people in sort of finding images that they may struggle to find through simple prompts, right? I mean, we kind of have that already with the search dialog box,
Mhm.
right? But maybe there could be a component to IC stock and other companies like you that incorporate AI as a means of image generation as well. But again, I think before that system gets into place and is successful, it really first comes back to protecting the artists before it can evolve into something as sophisticated as that. I think. I mean, I hope we'll see what happens.
Okay. Okay. And as an illustrator, what would you say, looking at, again, Icy stuff, as a platform that is here to help, people who are trying to get themselves out there, who are trying to get paid for their skills and their talents, from an illustrator standpoint? I know we talk about stock photos a lot, which is what the main purpose of Icy stock is, but eventually the goal is for us to grow into something bigger. So from an illustrator standpoint, for anybody who's out there watching, how do you see it benefiting them in future cases where, it kind of provides that diversity within their portfolio to, to give access to what they're able to create?
Yeah, I think as an illustrator, I've seen examples of illustration stock or illustration assets provided on stock sites. And I think it's a great thing in insofar as, there's a couple of benefits. One, obviously it's at the discretion of the artist to determine whether or not they want people to monetize on their assets that they upload, right? But you
Hmm.
can also share those assets for educational means as well. Like, every once in a while, I used to do this a lot more back when I did tutorials, but something about sharing a file so that people who are learning can have an inside glimpse into your process, how you build your files, how do you create certain elements within Illustrator, within Photoshop. you put that up on a stock site and sell that for a certain fee, and people willing to pay it, they can obviously have an opportunity to kind of go deep into what it is that goes into making a certain piece. Obviously there's still some mystery in terms of like not seeing it built from scratch, but at least it demystifies it a little bit in terms of, oh, okay, I see how he's parsing these logos or these layers together. I see how they're sorting out their colors. I see what they're doing with their opacity settings, things like that. I think there could be something very beneficial, especially from like a pedagogical standpoint, and for people to like learn and understand, the process of making certain things. So yeah, but there's definitely benefits for illustrators to partake in that for sure.
Okay. I kind of wanted to touch base on sort of your background. You talked about going to school for architecture, and your parents are super Haitian. So I kind of want to know, how did that transition happen for you? Especially, we know how our people are. We know we love our people, we love our parents, but I know that conversation was definitely something that must have been different for you in that space, from telling your parents,
Yeah.
I'm going to be an architecture and now an architect. And then now it's like, oh no, I'm going to do illustration moving forward. And what would you give as an advice to the young people out there, honestly, that's like, currently sort of going through that phase, that stage of their life, because it's not a phase anymore. Once you're at that point where you're like, you know what, this is a very career life-changing moment for me. So what would you say? How would you like help someone out there that might be right now, that may not be in architecture school, but in general, they're going through something similar where they're trying to move from the technical career base that, especially our Haitian parents, put on us, and then transitioning to their creative side and letting their creativity take over and being able to go out there and make those changes. And what would you say to someone who would want to do something like that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you were right. That transition, that conversation was not an easy one. And truth be told, I probably didn't go about it in the best way in terms of my internal rebellion against their dreams and wishes. Because it started out, their spiel. You're Haitian yourself. Like, they wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or like an engineer. Like, this is like a age-old tale amongst all first-generation immigrants, not just Haitian. Like, we all have this same conversation. And, I'm a bit more sensitive now to those dreams that they had, because it didn't really come from a space of what it is I was going to do, but rather financial security. And, now I'm a parent now, and I definitely have an understanding that, their concern was just, they just wanted me to be well off, like at the end of the day. And based off of their knowledge, what they were exposed to, especially being immigrants here in this country, people who made money were really just doctors or lawyers or engineers. Yeah. And I did this thing where, I fell for like the doctor thing. I was like, maybe I could be a doctor. Failed bio in high school, not because I was necessarily dumb, but because I didn't like it. So I didn't feel like doing it. And so that sort of opened my eyes a bit and opened their eyes for sure. And where my interests actually really lied. I knew deep down that I wanted to be an artist. Like, I wanted to make art, but I didn't know. And this is my next point. I didn't know that was actually a career choice. And that's the thing. It's that access to information that a lot of people of color don't have. Going well through high school into college, that they just don't know. Even to this day, they just don't know that you can have a career in art. It's called being a graphic designer. It's called being a design director, creative director. Photographers make mad money too. It's like, if the concern for our parents was the fiscal, the financial, I think if we were able to be educated and like, actually, what a doctor makes, I could also make that as a creative director at a big shot agency in New York City or in LA or in the Midwest, wherever I am. And like, I feel like the conversation would have gone very differently, because again, it wasn't about me being a doctor. Yeah, that might be a nice image, but it was more like, okay, they're going to have financial security. They're going to be able to buy a house. Exactly.
How are you supposed to help us move back to Haiti when we're retired? How does that work?
Exactly. That same conversation. We all have it.
Mhm,
So when I decided to do architecture, I did a bit of a bait and switch. I was like, it's like a dual degree program. This was at Catholic
mhm,
U in DC. I was like, I can do engineering and architecture. It was a 5-year program. And I had every ambition to do it. But after my first semester in engineering, I was like, I don't like
nice.
this. Like, and I have
Was
nothing against math and all that stuff. It's just like it just was boring. I just did not care to do this for the rest of my life. Architecture, on the other hand, kind of whet my appetite a little bit because there was a lot of creativity within that. There's a lot of critical thinking within that, understanding space, negative space, objects, figure ground, different geometries to play with. Like it was definitely something that was closer to what I was getting towards. And then
mhm,
fast forward to 8 years, I studied architecture for about 8 years. And I don't regret it for a second. I learned so much about myself as a creative. I learned how to grow a thick skin because architecture school, whoever's gone through it knows. I mean, those professors are not easy. They are very cruel sometimes.
mhm,
And I also learned a lot culturally as well. Got to travel a lot for architecture too. But deep down, I always had that love for illustration. Um, and then eventually it was around the time of the housing crisis back in 2000. I'm showing my age now, like 2008. I graduated from grad school back in 2011,
mhm.
and no one was hiring, or you needed like 10 years of experience that didn't exist for anyone at the time because no one was able to get work. I decided to just have an honest conversation with myself, and I was like, no, you know what, I'm going to try this illustration thing. I'm going to be making pennies for a while probably, but this is exactly what I want to do. And I had that conversation with my father, especially was tough to to accept it. My mom was like, all right, at least you're doing something, keeping yourself busy. I know it's tough times right now. We'll figure it out. My dad was like, you studied for this for so long, at least try for a little bit. And I did. I tried to get work. It wasn't working. When I finally landed my illustration job, it was like a big relief that I was like, okay, at least I got in the door somewhere. I have like my first freelance gig at an agency in New York City. Let's see how this pans out. Fast forward a little bit later, I landed at Vault and I haven't looked back. Like I was at Vault for about 10 years. And I tell you this, I'm not even joking. Maybe even about halfway through my career at Vault, my dad was still like, are you really done with architecture? Like, are you sure you don't want to just do? I was like, yes, like it's done. It's not happening anymore.
Wait, it's not
Granted,
happening anymore.
like that's it.
Stop when
I
you look
love
at
it.
the boss right here.
The profession, like studying architecture as a
Mhm,
student, is very romantic. You learn so many beautiful things about space, building structures, visiting these structures, trying to get into the minds of these great architects. Is wild. Like the Rem Koolhaases, the Frank Gehry's, like Zaha Hadid's. They're all wildly different. Stephen Hall, like they're all wildly different approaches, and you just learn so many interesting things in terms of how they think. And that's what I've held on to, was the critical thinking component about my work. That never went away. And how I present my work, how I talk to my clients, comes from architecture too. You
mhm,
just have to come across as confident and know what you're talking about, even if you're wrong. You got to be able to stick to your laurels and humbly accept defeat if need be. But
mhm.
that all comes from architecture. It hasn't gone away. I kind of see it as just shifting to a different dialect. It's like French. It's not just French. From Paris or France, you have the Quebecois. You have French in Canada. You have
Yes,
Swiss
that's
French.
me,
You have
friends.
French in Haiti. Like
Yeah.
there's different. It's like we all speak the same language. You get me? Whether you're a photographer, whether you're an architect, whether you're an illustrator, it's all the same. We all think the same. It's just being distributed very differently, and there's definitely a hierarchy in terms of what you're focusing on most. Whether it's more in the three-dimensional space versus the 2D space. You know what I mean? As an example.
Mhm. What is we've talked a lot about your journey to where you are, and getting to where you are and changing your career field and the work that you have done. What is something that you want to be remembered by? What is a saying, something that you believe is like, this is my daily bread, and somebody out there needs to hear this?
Oh man, like I don't know, man. I don't know if I don't know if I have anything as grandiose as that. I just want people to see my work and realize that I'm just having a great time, man. Like I'm just having fun. I love what I do so much. And I hope that that kind of passion for whatever it may be is passed on
Mhm.
to my child. It doesn't have to be within the arts. I just hope that they also find something that I think drives them, that gives them a reason to be like, you know what, life sucks, but at least I'm doing what I enjoy, and that's that. You know what I mean? Like you have a sense of, it's more than just like enjoying something. It's like having a purpose. Like you feel like you have some sort of purpose, and that takes place in many forms for all people. You know, I was just lucky enough to find mine, and I hope other people find their purpose too. I think that's really the only takeaway I could offer from that. I'm definitely no guru. I'm not the smartest person in the room. But I'm happy to have a great conversation with you if you see fit. That's it.
Okay. We're going to open up the floor to questions. So if you guys have any questions, you can write them down. N'importe question nou gen nou ka pose yo, et puis nou ka repon yo. Nou met koman si pose question, et pou nou ka continue avec interview. Last thing I have for you, Kervin, is what is something you are looking forward to seeing on the Ayisee Stock platform? And like something, especially from an illustrator standpoint, what is something you're looking forward to seeing, that is going to elevate that change to get, to that next level?
I think doing stuff like this is great. I feel like that's probably one thing that really could start to distinguish you guys from the other platforms that do the same thing, but obviously more catered for people of color, is having these platforms that create interesting conversations for people to sort of witness and see in the forefront, where, it goes back to our conversation about access and visibility. Like a lot of times people of color don't consider design or the arts as a legit career choice because they just don't see themselves in it. They don't see enough people that look like them in it. And I think doing these types of conversations consistently, and like not just showing people, oh, this is like a cool body of work that you can use for your own work. You can purchase this. This is made by a Black photographer, XYZ. But also hearing from those same people, I think it just changes the game for them, because I feel, especially when if you expose them earlier, like it just really starts to shift in their minds what's possible for them, outside of what they feel like is like this sort of just constant loophole that we find ourselves in, especially as young people of color. We feel like our choices are limited in terms of the career choices that we can make because of our upbringing, because of where we're from. It doesn't have to be that way. I think, the world's our oyster, not to be cliche, and doing these types of things constantly and bringing it to the forefront and letting people hear more about people like myself, people of color who are in design, I think that helps huge.
Okay. Do you have any specific illustrator that you follow that you would recommend for everyone to take a look? Or
Oh
others
man.
who would like to see us interview that you think would be a great asset to these type of conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I have his skate deck series right here. Let me see if I can turn my camera so you can see it. That skate deck, right? Hold on, let me see if I can do it right there by Kehinde Wiley. He does these very beautiful drawings, paintings, I should say. They're very floral, beautiful portrait work. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I would say Kehinde Wildly is a good one. Let me make sure I'm not misspelling that, mispronouncing that. But yeah, he's actually like probably one of my top 5 favorite artists right now.
Okay. And
Yeah,
how do you spell
Kehinde
his name?
Wildly. Yeah, it's KEHINDE, and then Wiley is WILEY.
Okay. W-Y. Okay.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
really cool stuff. Yeah, really cool.
That's good. It's good that you're keeping up with the others as well, and there's more inspiration from from the other aspects of it. Um, Anything you would like to share? I know I've been sitting here asking you a lot of questions that I want to know, but what is something that we didn't talk about here that you want to share?
Oh man, I don't know. I feel like I've been talking too much. I think I honestly feel like, no, not to say that this was like a drag or this was a lot of fun. I always get self-conscious when I feel like I ramble. I'm a big rambler. So I honestly think I've said all I could say in terms of myself and my process. I just hope that people, people, if they got anything out of this, it's just more about the fact that it's possible for you too. Honestly, like you heard my journey, you've heard where I came from and what I got to, and I think the only thing to caveat is that this just takes time. You got to be in it, man. You got to be in the trenches. You can't just expect this to happen overnight for you. Um, I'm almost 40 years old myself, and it's been years and years of just hard work and commitment and taking crap and failing and highs and lows and everything in between. And you just gotta be honest with yourself and just be like, if this is truly what I want, we'll get there somehow, some way. That it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it.
Okay. Can you hear me? I don't know. Something happened to the volume. Can you
I
hear
can
me
hear you just
properly?
fine.
You can hear me fine. Okay. I can't hear you, but I'm gonna ask the question anyways.
Okay.
We have one question from somebody named Antoine, and he asked, are you able to make a living with Illustrator? Do you feel like you're making a living with it?
Yes, you can. You can make a living. Absolutely. It's just one of those things where people sleep on it because they just think it's just drawing pretty pictures every day. A lot of people from the outside in don't really understand exactly, what actually goes into illustration. It's a very serious, legit, hardworking career choice to make it as an illustrator. Now, there's different aspects to it. You can be a fine art illustrator, like Hindewali over there, and fine artists, they get a gallery, they get hired, they get commissions to do work, not necessarily for clients per se. Um, that's one direction. Admittedly, you could argue it's a more difficult direction because you're not really leaning so much on clients to bring the bread and butter. You really gotta promote yourself and hopefully get into a space where you can actually be in gallery spaces. Or you can go in my direction where I'm at now, which is, being a commercial illustrator. And what that is pretty much doing something that requires answering a client brief. You're given projects. I have an agent, BA reps, that reps me in New York and worldwide, as I mentioned earlier. So and those projects, I mean, look, they let me put food on the table for my family. That's really it. And to be fair, yeah, I'm living pretty comfortably now after all these years. It's been good. It's been a good run. Yeah, and then if you're not in freelance, you can work as an illustrator in an agency like I did at Vault 49. Um, that's also a viable career choice. There's plenty of big agencies around the world, big and small, that hire graphic designers, typographers, illustrators for freelance or full time. And admittedly, you would be asked to be a bit more versatile in your skill set, I would say, to add more value to the company and to be able to disperse yourself amongst different types of clients eventually. Um, but yeah, that's just a long-winded way of saying yes, you definitely can make money as an illustrator for sure. Should I answer this next one? Looks like we got another one that came in.
Oh, sorry.
Uh,
We have one
yeah.
more question from Paul. He said, "How
Mhm.
would you describe your illustration style? Is it manga? I'm hoping I didn't say that wrong.
Yeah,
Manga or pop art?"
that's a good question. I get this all the time. And lately now, you could argue that my illustration style is leaning more towards a manga aesthetic because of the character work I've been doing a lot more of lately. Overall, I would say I'd say mainly it stays within the pop art space, especially when you look at my entire body of work. Just a lot of vibrant colors, simple color palettes, um, very bold line work as well. If you look at my photo illustration stuff, especially. Um, I can dive into more sort of sci-fi pop art also every once in a while too, which you might have seen, like Afrofuturism. That's another big theme that I've tackled over the last couple of years too. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. But I think if you wanted to put it in a box, you could say, yeah, like illustration pop art is kind of the vibe.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think if we don't, do we have any more questions? I'm not seeing any more. Um, but this was really great. I really enjoyed talking to you. I enjoyed getting to know more about you and the work that you have done. And I'm excited to see your work on Ayisee Stock. I will be looking for illustration and I will be looking for your name. We are excited to have you. Thank you for your time. And, I hope everyone learned, took something away from, this conversation. And, I hope it inspires someone out there who thought about making this, their livelihood, their passion, and then wanting to move forward with it. And I'm looking forward to seeing you grow and go even further. So that way, when your Haitian parents ask you again about the architecture school, he's like, yeah, I don't need it. I'm good.
Yeah, I'll happily say they're very happy with what I'm doing with now. They're like, you know what? We see how you're doing. You made the right choice. It's like, great, thank you. Only took you 35 years to understand. But no, I'm just kidding. No, my parents have been, honestly, they've been very patient and amazing. I have to say, super supportive, especially on the lows. They've been very supportive.
All right. Well, if that is it, well, thank you very much. And I hope everyone have a great rest of their day. Happy weekend.
Happy weekend to you guys.
Bye.
Thanks for having me and have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.